Hello, and let's join up episode 6 of Sovereign Citizens' Threats to Justice. Now, if you remember, in our previous episode, we were still on their application of their beliefs to the roadside stop. And I did provide the real key that opens up the fallacy and takes apart their logic and shows that all of their arguments are worthless. And that is the area of law that they never mention. I don't blame them. But it is a standard course in every law school, and you take 6 months or a year of solid studying to understand the concept of remedies. And remedies is, well, what are you entitled to do if you disagree with the law, or if you think that the government agent is not applying the law correctly? Well, first you realize those are very, 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 very different applications. So in other words, if you had a police officer who was not following the law of your jurisdiction, and let's say he was just sitting out on his front lawn, picking off people as they walked by, well, you would have the right to the law in your own hands and do something to protect your neighbors, or minimally contact 911. But that's one. The other one is, what if in the case of a sovereign citizen where they say, oh, no, it's not, we're not saying your law is wrong. We're saying that you just don't interpret it. We have a different interpretation of your law, and it says that we are allowed to drive without a license. I've gone through this so many times now in episodes 5 and 4 that we know that that's not true. It's never been true, and that it's based on a misunderstanding of a reading of a book that wouldn't be the law anyway, even if it said what the sovereign citizens claim they do. But no, Black's Law does not say you have to be employed. It does not say the driving has to be commercial or for commercial purposes. It doesn't say that at all. It just says that because there are people that have a limited vocabulary and didn't graduate high school who are trying to be lawyers. And so they say, well, it says here employed. It says here the vehicle has to be employed. No. It means used. Just like my pen is employed as a writing instrument. My golf club is employed as a sports object. No, it doesn't mean that you have to be paid to do it or something crazy like that. But let's get back to the idea of conflicts. And in the conflicts actually is a subsection of remedies. Let's hit remedies first. We'll drop down to conflicts. So in remedies, we're talking again, well, what is your right? If you are absolutely convinced by your tribal chief that the local city, state, constabulary are not following the laws correctly, and that the laws, now here's where they get to have it both ways, or they attempt to have it both ways. They first say, well, your laws are not the correct laws, our laws are, because our laws are given to us by God. So we throw that out right away, because this country is not based on anything being given to us by God. It's a secular country, and our laws do not come from God. They're not a message from God. That's the 10 Commandments. And therefore, you cannot use that here. If you want to have your own country, go ahead. So they're first saying that our laws are not the real laws. We didn't get them from the right place. And then they're going and having it both ways and saying, and you're not correctly interpreting your own laws. Your own laws, they say, right here say you can't make us have a license in order to drive. Doesn't say anything like that at all. Nothing like that. So you have two different kinds of remedies problems, and a person familiar with the law and trained in the law would know right away that all of these actions that people are I don't know if they're coming up with them or if they're not making them up, if somebody else is making them up and they're just going through their list. But the list of delays and harassment of the officers, where they go through a list of, I need to see your papers. I think the officers are within their rights to just say, give me your license within 1 minute or I'm going to drag you out of the car, and there's no stalling by way of forcing false discussions or providing me irrelevant papers. Now, I'm going to jump sideways for a second. We'll jump back in with the delays. Remember, the papers are irrelevant, but one of the things that even if they were relevant, which they're not, they're just junk, they're nonsense. All the papers you get as a sovereign citizen have no legal merit at all. But remember, even if they were, if you had a lawyer nearby to give you advice, he would say, well, remember, every large legal entity, and by that we can either say the legal entity could be a state, a city, a corporation, whatever, they have an agent for service of process. They have a person who's been appointed or elected or somehow, but something they have the job where it is their role to receive the legal pleadings of people who have a complaint against that entity. So let's say in California, we do have a person whose job it is to be the agent for service of process for the state. And so if you want to sue the state, it's not hard. When you think about it, that's really a great, fair thing that the state does that. So you don't have to try and find out who it is that you would serve your papers on. It's just written right there on the state's webpage. And all you do is you give your papers to that person, and now the state has been sued. Isn't that great? So if it was the CHP who didn't treat you right and you want to sue the CHP, you can just go to that same person who's in Sacramento and just say, here, I'm suing CHP and I think they treated me wrongly and I'm suing them. And I believe that the owners of the state jail didn't treat me right when I was in there. I think they violated the law of how you treat prisoners. And so I'm going to sue them too. Oh, same guy. Same person up in Sacramento can take your lawsuit and say, okay, great. We'll get it going. We'll send it down to the district attorney or the state's attorney general, and they will send you a response, and we'll get it in line for a court date to have it heard. Or you might have to get it in line for the court date. But let's get back to the roadside. We're back at the roadside, and you believe your papers right there in that expensive plastic binder that you keep underneath your crib and your kids who are crying, it says, oh, no, no, no. That officer cannot go in the car. He cannot look for anything. He needs your consent. That's lunatic. That's crazy. That is so wrong that I am surprised we have not seen lawsuits yet by the person who did that and then got their window broken. And you know, of course, if the police break your window, they can't let you drive away, can they? No. So if your window's broken, or I've seen this only twice, but or if your windshield's broken, I think that means they don't like you. You can't drive away. It's not safe. So now you have a car that you, have to have the window replaced, and man, that is a friggin' fortune. That is way more than it looks, because they have to go and chase all of the pieces of glass underneath the seats. And trying a vacuum doesn't work. It is a work of art to get underneath those seats and get all of the glass pieces. So now you've got a car that, A, you can't drive, B, it's not safe to drive, so you can't take it on the road, and it's probably going to be towed to the impound yard, where it's now going to rack up storage fees, right? Storage fees. And so if you were and I'm really sorry, I hope this isn't the case, but if you're somebody who is homeless and you bet your money on what they said, that you bought that packet of documents that said we guarantee we'll get you the right to just walk away from all of your legal obligations, whether you owe money, whether you're being stopped by the police, we're just going to give you the power to just say some magic mumbly words and to claim that you're from a foreign land far away. I think it's Plexiland or something like that, and you can claim that, and therefore laws don't apply to you. No, that is not how it works. That is the area of law. That's not remedies. It's a subsection of the area of law of remedies. It's the area of law of conflicts. And that is where, well, what if my law says one thing and your law says the other thing? How do we decide whose law prevails? Not what are your rights if you think yours prevails, or if you think theirs is right, but you want to try to ignore it. And there's a couple of examples of that we can go into. But what are your rights if you're just out there on the side of the road and you're trying to argue this case of the law with the police officer? First, you have no right to do that. Second, I'm hoping, I don't see it yet, but I'm hoping that judges will very shortly take each one of these attempts to waylay the conversation and turn it into something about their Moorish roots and just say, you know that's not true. It's already been held by the courts not to be true. As a matter of fact, I've got a piece of paper right here, a copy of the case from the Supreme Court saying, don't bring that shit up again. It has no legal standing in our law. But the point I'm getting to is that once you realize that their law is the prevailing law, even though you are certain that your law should be followed and that it's actually the correct law of the land, you have no rights to do anything based on that. Your rights say, really? Go into court, show it to a judge, and prove that you have the rights that your paperwork says you do. No, you cannot just jump in and start taking liberties based on the writing that somebody says that your law is the real law. Even if your law was the first law and everything else in it was true, under the law of conflicts and its sister, father area of law of remedies, you have no right to ignore the laws of the prevailing jurisdiction. To just think how stupid that would be. Are you saying that every car that drives down the street, the officer cannot pull over no matter how fast they're going because they could be a Moorish citizen? Or are you saying that, well, no, if it has a Moorish license tag on the back, license plate, the officer can't pull it over because he has no jurisdiction, because he's traveling? That's not traveling, that's driving. I'm not going to go through it again. You've heard it enough. And the only people who, after hearing this lecture, who don't understand that it is complete nonsense, it's a balloon that's deflated, that the idea that that the state cannot license the driving, the right to have insurance, and the right to have the car registered. I don't know if there's a name for that, the Holy Trinity. But if you do not understand that the court has the absolute right to require that you be licensed in all three of those areas, you're hopeless. You're either hopeless or too dumb to convince, or more likely you're making money on this deal. Because those are they're really only the ones that can't be convinced, the ones who are getting paid to not recognize that the law of the land is the law of the jurisdiction they're in. And if you want to change it, no, you can't engage in bickering, which is what you do, bicker law. You can't engage in bicker law with the poor officer on the street who has to be ready to wrestle people like you to the ground. That's not your right. That's not how people do it. What you have to do, if you want the whether it's a city, a state, if you want the jurisdiction to recognize some aspect of law, like you don't have to have a license because you have a Walmart jacket or whatever other argument you have that makes absolutely no sense, then you have to serve the sovereign. Notice that you're challenging the law, and usually it would still be up to you then to get the matter moving in court. Giving the sovereign notice does not do it in most cases, but there's a few types of cases where that would be all, and then it would be up to the state or the city or the county to set the matter up for trial from there. It just depends on the matter and the location, but the point is, that's where it is settled. It can't be settled by bickering with the officer. No matter how clever of a bickerer you are, no matter how many argumentative propositions you have in front of you, well, officer, did you follow the Constitution? You do agree that people do have the right to the Fourth Amendment, right? Well, all that makes you is irritating and stupid. The officer's job is not to bicker with you. The officer's job is to physically detain and stop criminals, of which you are one. So the idea that, no, I have a right to not be arrested as long as I can bicker, as long as I can engage in bicker law. Yeah, but officer, do you have your certificate of, and it's a certificate that no officer has on them. There is a certificate that they all have, but I'm certainly not going to help anybody inject that into the conversation. So to get back to the point, and the point is really pretty simple, the point is that the officer's job is not to engage in any sort of bickering or argument about what is the law, what isn't the law. And I feel very sorry for the officers who, in attempting to be calm and cooperative, actually get sucked into debating with you your right to drive without a license, because there is no such right to do that. Your paperwork, since it doesn't come from the sovereign that makes that rule, cannot change that. That was the part I was getting to in the area of conflicts. And that is that if you live in State A, and State A and County B in State A both say you must have a driver's license to drive on the road. All people operating any vehicle on the roads of the county or the state must have a driver's license and must be licensed. And that license is the property of the state. So we have the right to demand it back at any time. Usually that's what the law says, something like that. If you think you have paperwork that shows that that is not legal, you have no rights to do anything with the officer at the scene other than to completely cooperate as if you have no papers at all and you've never heard those ideas. If you want to argue about the state of the law, it has to be done, I've said this 3 times, it has to be done by starting a litigation with the sovereign, by going to the person whose job it is to receive lawsuits on behalf of the state or the county or the DMV. You could do it that way. I don't know your particular jurisdiction, how they do these things, but that's how it's done. You start an action, and sometimes there's a name for them that's used. It's not always appropriate, but sometimes it calls for a declaratory judgment. And that's where, let's say you're not in trouble, you haven't been arrested yet, but you are intending to drive without a driver's license. That's against the law. But you think, no, it's not against the law, because Black's Law Dictionary, if you don't understand what it says, and if you don't understand that it has no meaning or it has no authority, if you're completely lacking in both of those, which no lawyer would be, only a person who's playing lawyer would have that big a hole in their legal knowledge. So if you have that in your knowledge, that you have to go to the agent for the state notify them of your issues, and depending on your state's process, get it set up before a judge. Almost in every case, the process that you're going through does allow the opposing party, which would be the AG, the Attorney General, to file papers before the hearing saying this issue is so clear, it's so legally settled law that, Judge, don't set it up for a trial. Why waste your courtroom, and why make me have to put on a suit? Don't bother. Just rule on it now and just say, without a hearing, we can tell that the issue here is clearly decided, and therefore the sovereign citizens lose their motion, which they have always lost. They've never won in court once. That we're talking on the merits. You know, I saw the court where a case that they confused what happened, and the officer doesn't show up because of something, and the judge dismisses the traffic ticket against a sovereign citizen, and they try to claim, look, we won. That's it. We won the case because we had no driver's license, and the guy was charged with driving on a license, and yet he won, and the case is dismissed. Or he was actually better than dismissed. I know everybody confuses this, but he was found not guilty by the fact that the officer did not show up. And I thought that's an unusual way to handle those cases, but it wasn't my state. It was a different state where they do a lot of things different. But here's the point. The people confuse the fact that the person, the sovereign citizen type person, won, and think that that's what happened, when in fact, no, it was just on a technicality. The beliefs of the sovereign citizens organizations and the people who have those beliefs but are told don't admit that you're a sovereign citizen because the FBI has already declared us a terrorist organization. So those people, yes, one of their members won, but only on a technicality, and it's not citable. That's what the other real weird misunderstanding is. The people say, look, since we won here, now we can go into every court and we can say, here, we won in this court, blah, blah, blah. No, you can't. And to each one of you dingbats that I see out there trying to tell the officer, I was in court last week and I won. It was a case just like this. And the judge said, you win, and you can show that you won to everybody else, and that proves that. And, of course, you say, where's your paperwork, dude? Paperwork? Yeah, if everything the judge does is in writing. No, he didn't give me nothing in writing. Yes, he did, and you're lying. But the important thing is that what happens in a trial court, which is the lowest court when you walk in, that's not an appeals court where people go to appeal what happened in the trial court. It's not a Supreme Court where the appeals are then judged by the very best judges. And that means that you guys are trying to claim what went on in a trial court as binding law. It is not. Never. 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 It doesn't matter what the judge says in the trial court. You could win your case, you could lose your case, that's good for you, but it is not binding on other courtrooms. They don't have to follow what was said here at all. There is no binding effect to the rulings of the trial courts. So anybody out there saying, and you know it's just nonsense from the way they're explaining that a judge I'm not going to name, he looked at the case, it was the same as this one. No cases are the same as anything. Any lawyer knows that. And he said that I win and that I'm going to be getting all of my money back. No, you're not. No one has ever gotten a dime back, and that's why I'm just telling you people, you look so foolish. Sovereign citizens, when you threaten the officer with, I'm going to go after your bond, and I'm going to get your surety bond, and I'm suing you for $15,000 a second. They've already gone over this back at the jail and roll call, and they know that you have no ability to do any such thing, First of all, the law doesn't allow it. What the police are doing is protected. Second, even if what they were doing was wrong, they are allowed to make mistakes. They have qualified immunity. And you're screaming, I just took your qualified immunity, doesn't help you at all. It doesn't do that at one bit. It has to be an intentional, knowing violation of law for that person to get you, for you to be able to pass their qualified immunity. And not a breach of your understanding of the law. So when you walk away and say, see, I knew it, the Fourth Amendment, you just violated the Fourth Amendment. No, they didn't. The Fourth Amendment doesn't say you're entitled to be free of all searches and seizures. It says you're entitled to be free of unreasonable. And that's the word that shoots down every one of your stops. Every one of your stops that I've ever seen, when the officer wants to search the car, it's not unreasonable. Of course, to you it is, but that doesn't mean anything. That means zero. But to an average person, if the cop smells weed inside, or especially if you refuse to give him your identifying documents, he already has probable cause to search the vehicle. He has to make sure you're not a killer with a gun hidden in the car, so that if he happens to look down or he has to walk back to his car, you can't take the chance to run over and get a gun. Again, I would suggest you take a look at the very scary video, and it is on YouTube, of the female highway patrol officer who stops a young Chinese woman who has every excuse for the officer to go, no, I'm good, I don't need help, no help needed, no, my friend he's already here, no, go away, don't come here. And that's because she has a body in the car, if I remember right. But she does have it wasn't that she had a body in the car, it was that she was wanted, but she has a gun hidden in her clothes, and she wants a chance to run to the gun so she can kill the officer. Wow. You know, sometimes you think, boy, officer, you just lucked out. No, that officer didn't luck out one bit. That officer used her skill, her training, her expertise, and sniffed out that she had a woman who was a bad person, we'll say, and she tricked the woman into thinking that she didn't know that the woman was a suspect in a murder, and played her like a $2 fiddle. And that's why the officer, we're getting back to the roadside with the sovereign citizens, the officer has a right. The minute you refuse to provide your documents, you've now made this a very suspicious stop. For one, you've already violated the law. So if you violated the law, the officer's now, of course, entitled to your documents, because he has to write up a arrest report, because you refused to give the documents that you signed when you became a driver, that you would hand over upon the request of a police officer or a law enforcement officer, actually. So when you do that, you have given up all of your rights to any sort of, no, this is my property, you can't come in. That's so stupid. If you could teach 8th graders and they could answer that on a test and say, no, that's obviously wrong. The officers have probable cause because there's danger to the officer. There's also the smell of a violation of law coming from inside. He smelled the marijuana or whatever it is that he's accusing is in the car. But as soon as you started not refusing to identify yourself, your behavior is suspicious enough that they don't need your okay to get into the car. Well, what about the contract that I have taken back all of the contracts where I contracted to? There are no contracts. Dorothy, that's not here. That's in Oz. There's no contracts. You're not entitled to take back any contract. You are obligated not by contract, but by law to provide your license at the request of a peace officer, and provide your registration and provide your insurance. And you have to provide those when the peace officer asks. And you have no right to talk, to stall, to dance, to try to hand the officer papers, to threaten the officer. Now remember, that is a crime as well. So remember, you do have to, when you're calculating how much risk do I have out of this stop, the very first time you say that you're going to sue the officer, or you know their badge number and you're going to take all their money and you're going to see to them and you're going to sue the fuck out of them like the guy I saw today. First of all, they know that that's not true, because a real attorney never uses language like that. A real attorney, one of the first things you learn is the certainty of the case is something you don't discuss, because you don't know how good or bad your case is until you're into it. So when somebody says, I know I've got a winning case here, I'm going to sue you, that means they know nothing, and it's guaranteed. If you look in the car, they're living in their car. They have no money, they have no prospects of money, and that is the life stage of all people who follow this sovereign citizen doctrine. Every one of them is somebody who has missed their chance in life, who has exhausted their opportunities to make something of themselves, and is looking to see, can they get out of the trouble they're in by just doing a minimum amount of larceny. And it is all larceny. That's going to be it for today's episode. We ran out of time again. So that's it for the car, for stopping it, and we're here at the scene of the road. So for the next episode, and that'll come out next Friday, I'm going to get into how does the sovereign citizen case fall apart in court? What about the transport? Well, I haven't seen anything there that really affects the case that much, so I don't have any plans to go into that right now. But we're going to get into when the person walks into court with their briefcase and immediately says, Your Honor, I'm standing here. I do not wish to stand in front of the podium that is designated by so-and-so as a piece of conflict, and I want to let you know that I'm appearing here in pro per sui generis, Fred Norris, all the Norrises are here, and Fred prefers Eric Norris. Okay, Eric Norris, Fred Norris, Jackie the joke man, they're all here. And so that's how they start, and I'll tell you how I put that very bad smell right back in the bottle, and how other judges should be doing it and aren't. And we will go into that in depth. So if you know anyone who is a sovereign citizen, or is thinking about being a sovereign citizen, or is in the law profession, or is a judge especially, and wants to hear how these things really should be handled for the maximum protection of the court, of the court system, of the arresting officer, and yourself, tune in next Friday to Sovereign Citizen. We'll see you then.